I think I lost about 50,000 followers. The analytics were going crazy. As I created more political content, I would be losing so much of my old demographic. What is more important to you, your followers or the Philippines? Like, I would much rather regret doing too much for the country rather than, not being able to give it all. Hey, Janina Vela here. Welcome back to the Soul Podcast. I'm so excited to be here today. I just graduated Pol Sci last year, and I have been on social media as a beauty and lifestyle content creator for 10 years this year. So today I will be talking about that complexity and that irony. So I started in 2015 at 15 years old doing beauty content, and it was so much fun because I was a girl. I was just a girl who loved makeup and room DIYs and roll B-roll of my super crazy pastel room. But I'm going back to my roots now. Um, and I loved it. But there was a shift. But I won't say that it was a single shift. There were many shifts throughout the years that it was a slow unraveling, if you will, like a quiet, unsettling feeling that I had that I kind of needed to do something more, a little bit bigger than what I was doing. That jump didn't go straight into politics right away. It was beauty, and then suddenly we were talking about women empowerment. I remember my first International Women's Day with the UN. What I did in that speech was that I talked about inner beauty, or I talked about beauty, then I talked about inner beauty and women empowerment. And on stage, I removed my makeup. I removed my eye makeup, talking about how, I didn't want to focus just on how long my lashes were, but if my eyes could really see the beauty in the world, right? Or my nail polish, it doesn't have to be pretty as long as I use my hands to serve other people. And those words, I think, really, how do you say, planted seeds in me. The moment I said it, planted seeds in my platform. The moment I said that, I think that was 2016 or 2017. And actually, the harvest didn't come right then and there yet, because I moved from women empowerment. Then I got into mental health, which I still am into until now. Because that was my passion at the time. Because again, when I was 15, I loved makeup. And then suddenly at 17, 18, mental health was super important to me because that was something that I had to deal with. And then 17, 18, 19 was the year, 1920, because what was it? Oh, the pandemic. How could I forget? It's the pandemic. There was a water shortage pa, I think a little bit before the pandemic. And the water shortage, oh gosh, I tell this story with so much pride and so much shame at the same time, because when the water shortage happened, we did not have water for a month, I would say, in my house. And it was so post-apocalyptic because there would be fire trucks that would come into like our village, and we would come out with pails, line up, and they would like put water in our little buckets. And that was so forming for me. I remember telling that I was part of this coalition called We the Youth Vote during the elections. I told that story because I ended up researching why didn't we have water? Ano ba talaga yung El Nido? Totoo ba yung El Nido? And I looked at all of the documents and the legal cases. Anyway, so I told that story with much pride that somehow I earned a gold star because I didn't have water for a month. And that now seems absolutely insane to say. And I know that it is because when I told that story, somebody commented, walang tubig si Janina isang buwan, hindi niya alam. Parang ganyan talaga yung buhay namin sa probinsya. And that, oh gosh, that crushed me. I was absolutely, I feel like the ground just opened beneath me and I wanted to be swallowed whole. Like, how embarrassing is that I thought, look at me, I pushed through. Hardest time of my life. I had to shower with a tabo. Like, but, that was like the moment that I had to say, girl, get up. Like, you need to look beyond the four corners of your walls. You need to look outside, walk outside, touch some grass. Like, get out of this privileged bubble that you have grown up in and actually see real life. Like, what is life like for Filipinos beyond your comfort? And that was very uncomfortable to do. When you're faced with that kind of discomfort, kasi there are, I guess, your fight or flight responses come in. Literally, maybe you'd want to run away because awareness is so uncomfortable. Like, you'd think awareness turns into action, and that's how we have activists, which is great in like a really optimistic world. But sometimes when you're met with awareness and discomfort, you want to run because, again, how embarrassing is that story? But thankfully, something in me and all of the books that I read, because I had so much time in the pandemic. I read a lot of political books and his history books, global everything, Philippines, and yeah, something shifted. I thought that I did not deserve to have 1 month of no water, and all the more I realized, oh gosh, Filipinos deserve more than this. This is absolutely insane. This is a basic right. This is not something that has to be fought for, kumbaga, diba? This is not something that has to be even discussed. What do you mean you don't have water? So that awareness thankfully made me so uncomfortable that I had to move. And again, that's why I pushed harder for the elections. I started making political content, and I interned in multiple mayor's offices, and now we're here. Now we're here, and again, this walking irony of a 26-year-old girly girl who who graduated pol sci. It's interesting because people assume that I'm going to go into politics, and they assume that, or maybe that I'm going to be a lawyer, or that I'm going to be some kind of activist. I think that's fine to assume that. That's very valid because, this equals this. I actually love that I'm a walking contradiction because I think it's realistic. Because the truth is, I don't think that every person who has a heart for the Philippines has to end up in office. Why? Because I think everybody should have a heart for the Philippines, even if you're in office or not. Me, loving makeup still, it's not something that I'm going to give up. Like, I love putting on makeup. I love buying products and all of those things. And that's not a part of me that I'm going to neglect just because, I'm passionate about this. Both can coexist at the same time. I can be a girly girl and I can be sometimes a very intense, passionate activist. But that's what makes me me. And I think that is something that I wish, people understood, is that you can be you. You don't have to change so much just because you care about the Philippines. You don't have to change your entire lifestyle or your entire personality because you want to vote right or because you want to help people vote right. But all of it can actually coexist at the same time. That's humanity. We're complicated. And I love that about humans. So I don't know where I'm going. No, I was watching this interview on TikTok about and John Green was talking about, parang somebody asked him, I think, to make a case for books. Um And he said books are one of the only media where you can put yourself in another person's shoes so wholly. I fully butchered that quote. But basically, what he was trying to say is when you're watching a movie, you are watching, for example, Katniss go through the Hunger Games. When you read a book, you are Katniss. I am the Mockingjay. No, when you read a book, I'm not as detached as I guess I am, and mentally, emotionally, my soul somehow gets intertwined with the person who is living or who has lived this experience. I remember I read this book called Subversive Lives, and I don't mean to like dilute know what they're going through just because I read a book. But my point is, I definitely would not feel as strongly as I do now about certain issues as I do now because I have read these words firsthand. So there are a lot of autobiographies that I have read that really shape the way that I view the world. Because, if I'm honest with you, I was so idealistic growing up. Generally, I'm an optimistic, very hopeful person. And so having again privilege bubble popped and even just that realism set in, also fighting pessimism at the same time. It was important for me to know more than what I know, I guess. It was the Filipino ones though that really changed my life because that's where I didn't only see the trauma of the Filipino people, but I saw the strength and the dignity and the competence actually of the Filipino people that I don't feel like is highlighted now. So that was so important for me because that's when I realized that, oh, kaya naman pala eh. Parang may kakayahan ang Pilipino. Why is there somehow a glass ceiling that nobody seems to be able to break? And again, that propelled me even further because I'm like, okay, so there, we can do it. There's a problem. What is the problem? You know, a lot of it is the systems that we have put up. And even if, yes, I'm not going to go, well, I don't want to say that for sure, right? But I have no plans of going into political office or public office, but I wanted to learn more about that. You know, that's the thing with knowledge that's hard about knowledge is that when you learn something new, you realize how much you don't know. And that is like a bottomless pit that I have been in since the very first book that I read. So I read as much as I could, but that certainly wasn't enough. But I was still speaking up already at the time. I had my Trendsetter series on YouTube at the time. Yeah, I didn't want to be a random like influencer who's just saying random things, but I wanted to make sure that my sources were credible. I wanted to make sure that I had some level of credibility to even be speaking in depth about these things, and that is why I ended up in political science. I was 1 month away from the deadline, I think, or from the asset, that I was like, you know what the heck, let's try it. You know, you know, as a content creator, I wasn't really thinking of like college actually, but yeah, I tried out for Ateneo. I got in, and 4 years later, I am who I am today. I think I would still say I am an idealist, but definitely there is some realism that is keeping my feet on the ground, which I think is healthy. I think that's important. But yeah, turning the knowledge into action now is my next battle. When I shifted, I remember the very first video, I think 50% was good and 50% was bad comments. And a lot of people were very happy that I was speaking on something like that, and they were surprised that I had that depth, which seems like a backhanded compliment. But I will take it. They said I had depth, so 50% were like, "Stay in your lane. Like, why are you even talking about this? You're just like a girl." And I was. I think I am just a girl, but I'm a girl who's passionate about the Philippines. So what can you do? As I created more political content, my followers were like, the analytics were going crazy. They were going up and down because I would be losing so much of my old demographic who obviously followed me for makeup. And I have no problem with that. That's super fair. You followed me because of a certain niche, and suddenly I shifted, which is fine. It's like canceling with your service provider. I will be honest, I think I lost about 50,000 followers. Yeah. So that was a struggle for me because as I was doing that, I was having like an internal mm, value, like my personal value issue. Like I also had to check, is this really that important to you? But also like, what is more important to you, your followers or the Philippines? Or like literally like this passion, or all of these projects that you're losing because of this. Because okay, at the time, I don't think, at least the brands that I work with now don't have this clause anymore. But I worked with a huge brand, and when I was younger, and they had a clause where I wasn't allowed to speak up politically. And my management at the time, I asked them about it, and they said, "No, we actually highly discourage our artists to speak up that way, or to endorse a certain candidate." And that was the vibe at the time. I mean that's where we came from. And thankfully it's so different now, like 6 years later, but that's what I had to push through. Thankfully, being political and being vocal and speaking up is cool now, and sometimes it's like performative now, which is super interesting to watch because I was like, y'all were hating me like 6 years ago for this. But yeah, it was tough for sure. But before I would post anything, there would always be that question that I had to ask, like, okay, is this really worth it to you? What's the worst that can happen? And I don't know, that question really stuck with me for so long. What's the worst that can happen? Because your answer could be the worst that can happen is somebody will, like, people will unfollow me, and I'll lose all my followers, and I won't have income anymore. But I don't know, that for some reason was always outweighed by my, I guess, intense feeling that I had to say something and that I had to be vocal and I had to speak up about this, or else I will never know peace. And I knew that I would much rather regret years from now speaking up rather than regret not speaking up. Like, I would much rather regret doing too much for the country, and doing and giving too much to the Philippines, rather than, you know, not being able to give at all, or like choosing my comfort over that. And thankfully, I'm still alive. No red tagging here. I will say though that I have been able, more or less, to skirt the line between, or not to skirt the line, to stay within the safe boundaries of being able to say what I need to say, but not going overboard. And that was so important for me because I did not want to be hateful. That was so important for me from the very beginning, that I didn't just want to be an angry girl who was like angry at the government, because truthfully, we have so many of those. And so if you want emotion, there are people who can offer that for you. Um, not saying anything wrong about that. We do need that. I think passion in that way can move mountains still, but I wanted to move mountains a different way. And that was through sharing my principles and sharing my values. So you'll notice that my rhythm in all of my videos, I tell the issue, but then I always end with a principle. So you can kind of deduce my opinion, but nobody can really get a direct quote, which I think has been the safe way to do it, because nobody questions, like, of course Janina is against this, of course Janina is for this, everybody knows. But you can't get a direct quote from me. All you'll hear is something about righteousness, something about wisdom, something about equality, something about fairness. And that's because principles are long standing, like they're long term. No matter who is in power, no matter who gets, dejected from power, those principles will stay the same. Years from now, somehow my videos will still be quote unquote relevant, because righteousness will always be righteousness, and kindness will always be kindness, and equality will always be equality. And so it was important for me to make sure that I also wasn't teaching Filipinos what to think, because that is a problem that I saw already. There would be a political candidate and he would say, vote for me. And they'd say, yes, vote for me. Here's X money, right? To be even more frank about it. But that's teaching them what to think. That's telling them what to do, especially when it comes to the future of our nation. And that's not what I wanted to do, even if it was a good candidate. Even if I knew that they were a righteous candidate and I said, vote for them, and they said, okay, that would not sit right with me, because that would be my decision and not theirs. So I'm not actually investing in this muscle that needs to be formed to be able to think critically and decide for themselves. Like, I would just be quote unquote as bad as the corrupt politician telling them what to do. But I want the Filipino to be an independent thinker. That's my dream, is that hopefully we will elect the same person, but it won't be just because of what I said. It'll be hopefully because of the principles that I laid out for us, but because you believe so, and because you did the math and you decided so. So that is so I guess integral to my platform, is that when I'm talking, I don't want them to just take my opinion and just call it a day. I wanted to teach people how to think, not what to think. I have so much respect for journalists who do this every single day, or reporters who have to get reports and like report them live on camera every single day. I think that's super insane. I post as much as I can when I can, but definitely the research that goes into it, because it takes me a few days, 1 to 3 days. Even a 1 minute video, I will research one day, go the next day and look back at my research to make sure that it's credible, that it's correct. If there are any developments that even, change what I wrote the day before, then I will edit it, because there's so much misinformation and I do not. My greatest fear is that I contribute to that. I am doing everything I can. I'm setting up my own safeguards. I'm having as much boundaries as I can and filters even. So that I don't contribute to the misinformation that is already there. Political stuff don't pay unless you're corrupt. So I don't get paid with all of these things. Like, even during election season, when you see me endorsing a certain candidate, no money there. But I love it, But, girls gotta get paid. Girls gotta eat. So, I will do beauty content and lifestyle content because, again, that's still important to me. But also, I, well, let's be real, I need some income. But when when my heart's in the right place, when I'm not coming from a place of anger or hate, um, when I know that I'm mentally okay to do this. Because, I mean, the worst thing is that I'll post something and I've had that where I end up just like dead. Okay, here's the process. Something happens, I'll research. And then the next day, I'll look back on my research. So I have to research again. Third day, I'll rewrite. Maybe even fourth day, I'll go back to what I wrote and I'll rewrite again. If it's a topic that's way beyond my pay grade, I'm going to call a professional. I'm going to get them to look at the script. I'm going to ask them these questions. Oh, malito. Rewrite again. And then so when I rewrite, and then I'll post that, and then I get hate. And I'm like, damn. And then somebody rebuts. So then I have to write a new thing to rebut the rebuttal. And that whole thing is just one minute video. I'm tired. That's exhausting. So yeah, I guess I balance that with the other content that is safe, it's fun, it's enjoyable. But when I have the strength to do what I genuinely believe I'm called to do, then I'll go back to politics. I think I've evolved so much as a person, being able to quote unquote live hundreds of lives more than I would have if I just stayed silent. Even with the political side that I don't agree with, and the supporters of political candidates that I don't support, learning and listening to them has changed my life. Because it's so easy to villainize these people and to think, oh wow, bobo lang sila, bobotante, like they don't even know what they're doing. I'll be honest, and I think I thought that for a bit. And then you talk to them and you realize that this person actually was helped by that candidate that you hate so much. I have my qualms about that, long term, short term, change, yada, yada, yada. But in those moments where I am put in a position where I can either reject another person's reality just because it's not my truth, or I can have empathy for people I don't even agree with, that has changed who I am as a person, even beyond politically. Because now am not, I try, I try not to be so rigid with my opinions and my beliefs. I try now to welcome disagreement. I welcome, okay, this person is different. And that's fine. And in that whole scenario, how do you explain it? I feel more alive. I feel for some reason like larger, like life is so beautiful and it's so complex. And I think that is Filipinos for you. It has grown me so much in a way that I didn't think that was possible, because I'm not the main character. I'm not the center of my universe. Like, people come and people go, and the opinions go through my mind, and these stories go through my heart, and it just evolves you in a way that I can't really explain. But obviously, that starts with having An open heart and an open mind and an open soul podcast. Wow. I think your life can be changed if you allow your life to be changed. I think filtering every single thing that comes inside your bubble sometimes creates your own echo chamber. And I've had an echo chamber for a while, but the maturity that has come from, again, stepping out of that echo chamber and realizing, oh, this way could be correct too. This belief, I kind of see the point in that. The intelligence is beyond like book smart, what you can learn in school, I think is what I'm trying to say, where it becomes somehow a level of emotional intelligence. I don't know, I guess that's the magic of empathy. When people ask me like where where did this all come from, like why suddenly you want to do all of these things, like you want to do something bigger than you want to invest and you want to serve, I'll be so honest with you, that started in church. Like I saw that growing up. My dad is a pastor and my mom is an excellent pastor's wife, and I've watched my siblings volunteer in church. Obviously what I do now is a little different from kids church and ushering and the things that we're used to have happening in church, but the principle is the same. The theology is the same. The Bible that we read is the same. So the same hands that are the different body parts that make up the body of Christ, are also the same hands that serve the poor and the weary and the widow and the orphan, which is also a commandment in the Bible. The muscles and the beliefs and the theology that shaped me to speak up politically is the same theology and the same muscles that have shaped me to serve in church, that have shaped me to worship the Lord. Like they are not separate at all. That is an extra funny irony to it, is that wow, she's a super Christian girl. And yes, I am a super Christian girl and I'm a super political girl. And that is something that, well, that's me. The heart to invest in the next generation has always been there. And that's something that I grew up with in church. I love God's people. And I learned that from my parents. And my parents have loved the church so wholeheartedly in the same way that I want to pour out that intense, overflowing agape love towards the Filipino people. So this has been Janina Vela. If you want to hear more, you will have the next episode of around the same idea next week on the Soul Podcast.